The red dust of Mars swirled around Jake's boots as he walked toward the mining pit. It was just another regular day at Colony 7, the biggest mining operation humans had ever built outside Earth. Jake had been working here for 3 years, as an engineer, checking tunnels and making sure the giant machines didn't break down. Another boring day in paradise, Jake muttered to himself, adjusting his oxygen mask. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky landscape, and the Earth looked like a tiny blue dot in the dark sky above. Jake loved his job, even though it wasn't glamorous. Someone had to make sure the mining equipment worked properly, and he was good at fixing things. His team trusted him, and that meant everything out here where one mistake could cost lives. As he reached the main excavation site, something caught his eye. The drill operators were standing around looking confused instead of working. Their massive drilling machine had stopped, and everyone was staring down into the newly dug hole. "What's going on here?" Jake called out as he approached the group. Tommy, the lead drill operator, looked up with a puzzled expression. "The strangest thing happened, Jake. We were drilling down to the usual depth when the drill just stopped. Not broken or anything, just stopped like it hit something really hard." Jake peered down into the hole. About 50 feet down, he could see something glinting in the artificial lights. It wasn't the usual reddish rock of Mars. This was something different, something that seemed to catch and reflect light in an unusual way. "Did you try drilling around it?" Jake asked. "Yeah, we tried 3 different spots in a circle. Same thing every time. It's like there's a huge solid object down there, bigger than anything we've ever found." Jake felt his curiosity growing. In his 3 years on Mars, they'd found plenty of interesting rock formations and mineral deposits, but nothing that could stop their industrial drills. These machines could cut through almost anything. "Let me get my equipment," Jake said. "I'm going down to take a look." 20 minutes later, Jake was being lowered into the pit on a safety cable, wearing his full environmental suit. The walls of the hole showed the typical layers of Martian soil and rock, but as he got closer to the bottom, everything changed. The object blocking their path wasn't rock at all. It was some kind of smooth, crystalline surface that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. The material was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It looked almost organic, like it was alive, but clearly artificial at the same time. "Can you see anything down there?" Tommy's voice crackled through the radio. "You're not going to believe this," Jake replied, running his gloved hand over the smooth surface. "It's not a rock formation. This looks like some kind of structure." As soon as Jake's hand made contact with the crystal surface, something incredible happened. The entire object began to glow brighter, pulsing with waves of blue and green light that seemed to respond to his touch. The glow was warm and somehow comforting, not harsh like the industrial lights they used in the mines. "Jake, what's happening down there? We can see light coming up from the hole." But Jake couldn't answer. The moment he touched the crystal, his world changed completely. Images flooded his mind, not his own memories, but something else entirely. He saw vast cities floating among the stars, beings that looked almost human, but weren't quite, and massive, ships traveling between distant worlds. He saw wars that lasted for centuries, entire planets turning to dust, and civilizations rising and falling across the galaxy. But strangest of all, he saw himself, or someone who looked exactly like him, standing before creatures that could only be described as aliens. The visions lasted only a few seconds, but they felt like hours. When Jake's mind cleared, he was still touching the crystal, but everything had changed. The object was now glowing so brightly that he had to shield his eyes, and he could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Pull me up," Jake shouted into his radio. "Pull me up right now." As the cable lifted him toward the surface, Jake noticed something was different about himself. His vision seemed sharper, and he could understand the radio chatter from the mining equipment around him, even though it was usually just static and code numbers. Somehow the patterns made perfect sense to him now. When Jake reached the surface, the entire mining crew was staring at the hole, which was now glowing like a beacon. The light was visible even in the bright Martian daylight. "What did you do down there?" Tommy asked, his voice filled with amazement and worry. "I just touched it," Jake said, pulling off his helmet. "But guys, I don't think this thing is from Mars. I don't think it's from anywhere in our solar system." Over the next few hours, the glow from the crystal grew stronger instead of fading. Even more disturbing, every piece of electronic equipment in the colony began picking up strange signals. The communications array was receiving transmissions on frequencies that shouldn't exist, and the computer systems were displaying symbols that no one recognized. Jake found himself understanding some of these symbols, which scared him more than anything else. How could he possibly know what alien writing meant? Dr. Lisa Chang, the colony's chief scientist, arrived at the excavation site with her entire research team. She ran every test she could think of, but the readings made no sense. The object was definitely artificial, older than human civilization, and actively transmitting some kind of signal into space. "Jake, I need you to tell me exactly what happened when you touched that thing," Dr. Chang said, looking at the data on her tablet with a worried expression. Jake described the visions as best he could, but even as he spoke, he realized how crazy it all sounded. Floating cities, alien wars, and prophecies about humans saving the galaxy. It was like something out of a science fiction movie. But Dr. Chang didn't laugh or dismiss his story. Instead, she showed him the readings from her instruments. "Whatever you experienced, it was real in some way. This object has been sending a signal since you touched it, and our deep space monitoring equipment is picking up responses." Responses? Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Something out there heard the signal, Jake. Multiple somethings. And they're heading this way." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw more visions. Ancient beings, who looked like they were made of pure energy, creating objects of incredible power and scattering them throughout the galaxy. A great darkness spreading from world to world, destroying everything in its path. And always, the same image of himself, standing before alien creatures who looked at him with something that might have been hope. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Earth's orbital monitoring stations had detected several objects entering the solar system, moving faster than any known technology could achieve. They were heading straight for Mars. Jake stood at the observation deck of the colony's main building, watching the Martian sunrise and thinking about his ordinary life that had suddenly become anything but ordinary. In just 2 days, he would meet beings from another world, and somehow he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The crystal continued to pulse with its mysterious light, and Jake could feel it calling to him as if it were trying to tell him something important. He had the strange feeling that his real journey was just beginning, and that everything he'd experienced so far was just preparation for what was coming. As he watched the red horizon, Jake wondered if he was ready for whatever the universe was about to throw at him. One thing was certain. His days as just another mining engineer were over. Whether he liked it or not, he was about to become part of something much bigger than himself. Jake woke up in a room that definitely wasn't on Mars. The walls curved in impossible ways, and everything seemed to be made of the same crystal material he'd touched in the mining pit. Soft, warm light flowed through the walls themselves, and the air felt different somehow, cleaner and easier to breathe than even Earth's atmosphere. "You're awake," said a gentle voice behind him. "We were worried the transition might have been too much for your human physiology." Jake turned around and came face to face with the most beautiful being he had ever seen. She looked almost human, but her skin had a slight blue tint and seemed to shimmer like starlight. Her eyes were larger than a human's and completely silver, reflecting light like mirrors. Despite her alien appearance, something about her felt familiar and comforting. "Who are you?" Jake asked. sitting up slowly. His body felt strange, stronger somehow, but also different in ways he couldn't explain. "I am Queen Zara of the Zephyrian people," she said, moving closer with graceful steps that seemed to barely touch the floor. "And you, Jake Thompson of Earth, are the reason our people still have hope after 1,000 years of darkness." Jake blinked hard, wondering if he was still dreaming. "Queen, look, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm just a mining engineer. I fix machines and check tunnel supports. I'm nobody special." Queen Zara smiled, and her expression was both sad and hopeful at the same time. "That's exactly what the prophecy said you would say. The human of legend would not know his own importance until the moment came to fulfill his destiny." She waved her hand, and the walls around them became transparent, revealing the most incredible sight Jake had ever imagined. They were inside a massive spaceship traveling through the stars. But this wasn't like the spaceships in movies. This vessel was alive somehow, its corridors pulsing gently like veins, its surfaces warm to the touch. "Welcome aboard the Celestial, Dream," Queen Zara said. "This ship has been my home since the fall of our empire 15 years ago. It's also been searching for you." "Searching for me? But how did you even know I existed?" Queen Zara gestured for Jake to follow her as she walked toward what looked like a viewing area. "The story begins long before your species even existed. Millions of years ago, there was a race called the Precursors who had evolved beyond physical form. They could see the future, all possible futures, and they saw a great darkness coming." As she spoke, images began appearing in the crystal walls around them, showing Jake scenes from across the galaxy. He saw magnificent cities on worlds he couldn't even imagine, beings of incredible beauty and wisdom, and technology that seemed like magic. The Precursors knew they couldn't stop this darkness themselves, because they had already moved beyond the physical world. So they created 7 special objects, each one containing a piece of their knowledge and power. They scattered these objects across the galaxy and left behind a prophecy. The images changed, showing the same crystal Jake had found on Mars, along with 6 others that looked similar but different. Each one pulsed with its own color and seemed to have its own personality. The prophecy spoke of a being from a young world who would have the ability to find and use these objects. This being would unite the scattered forces of good and drive back the darkness that threatened to consume everything. Jake stared at the images, feeling overwhelmed. "And you think, that's me? Based on what, touching one crystal?" "Based on much more than that," Queen Zara said softly. "Jake, what languages do you speak?" "Just English and a little Spanish from school." "Why?" Queen Zara began speaking in a flowing, musical language that sounded like wind chimes and ocean waves. To Jake's amazement, he understood every word perfectly. "I just told you the story of how my people first learned to travel between stars," she said, switching back to English. "You understood every word, didn't you?" Jake nodded, feeling a chill run down his spine. "But that's impossible. I've never heard that language before in my life." "It's one of your gifts, Jake. The ability to understand and communicate with any intelligent species. Watch this." She led him to another section of the ship where several other beings were working. Jake saw creatures that looked like giant butterflies with 6 arms, others that resembled walking trees with glowing bark, and beings made of what looked like living metal. As they approached, each being greeted Jake in their own language, and, incredibly, he understood all of them perfectly. More than that, he found himself responding in their languages without even thinking about it. "This is impossible," Jake whispered. "How am I doing this?" "The crystal you touched wasn't just any artifact," Queen Zara explained. "It was the first of the 7, the one called the Heart of Understanding. It awakened abilities that were always inside you, abilities that every human possesses but doesn't know how to access." They walked through more sections of the ship, and Jake met dozens of different species, all refugees from worlds that had been destroyed by something called the Dominion Empire. Each being had lost their home, their families, their entire civilizations, to this spreading darkness. "The Dominion has conquered most of the galaxy," Queen Zara said, as they stood before a massive star chart showing red zones spreading like a disease across thousands of worlds. "They don't just defeat civilizations, Jake. They enslave them, strip away everything that makes them unique, and turn them into mindless servants." Jake studied the chart, and somehow he could read the alien symbols and understand the scale of the destruction. Billions of beings enslaved, entire species wiped out, worlds turned into factories for war machines. "Why doesn't everyone just work together to stop them?" "Because fear makes people suspicious of each other," Queen Zara said sadly. "The free worlds that remain don't trust each other enough to unite. The bird-like Avirians think the crystal beings from Jamoria are too dangerous. The water-dwellers from Aquatica refuse to work with anyone who breathes air. Old prejudices and ancient conflicts keep us divided while the Dominion grows stronger." She turned to face Jake directly, and her silver eyes seemed to look right into his soul. "But you're different, Jake. You don't see us as aliens or enemies. When you look at us, what do you see?" Jake thought about it carefully. "I see people who are scared and far from home. I see beings who've lost everything but are still fighting to protect what's left. I see people like me, just trying to do the right thing." Queen Zara smiled, and for the first time since Jake had met her, she looked truly hopeful. "That's why you're the human of legend, Jake. Not because you have special powers, though you do. Not because you can use the precursor artifacts, though you can. You're special because you see past differences to what really matters." She showed him more of the ship, including a room filled with advanced technology that Jake somehow knew how to operate just by looking at it. Computers that responded to his thoughts, weapons that felt familiar in his hands, and healing devices that he understood instinctively. "The other 6 crystals are scattered across the galaxy," Queen Zara said as they returned to the main viewing area. "Each one will unlock more of your abilities and gather more allies to our cause. But Jake, I have to warn you about something." Her expression grew serious, and Jake could see worry in her silver eyes. "The Dominion knows about the prophecy, too. Their emperor has been hunting for the crystals for centuries, destroying any world where he thinks one might be hidden. When you activated the first crystal, you sent a signal that he definitely detected. As if her words had summoned them, alarms began sounding throughout the ship." Jake could see other vessels appearing on the viewing screens, dark and angular ships that radiated menace even from a distance. "They found us," Queen Zara said quietly. "Jake, I'm sorry, but your peaceful life as a mining engineer just officially ended. From now on, you're either going to be the galaxy's greatest hope, or you're going to be dead." Jake looked at the approaching enemy ships, then at Queen Zara and all the other beings who were counting on him. He thought about Earth, about his friends at the mining colony, about all the innocent people who had no idea what was coming. "Then I guess we better make sure I'm the greatest hope," Jake said, surprised by the determination in his own voice. "Where do we find the next crystal?" The first battle happened faster than Jake could have imagined. One moment they were talking peacefully aboard the Celestial Dream, and the next, the entire ship was shaking as enemy fire hit their shields. Queen Zara rushed to the control center, with Jake right behind her, his heart pounding as he saw the dark Dominion ships surrounding them. "Can we fight them?" Jake asked, watching the crew work frantically at their stations. "Not directly," Queen Zara replied, her fingers dancing, over crystal controls that responded to her touch. "We're a research vessel, not a warship. But we have something they don't expect." She grabbed Jake's hand and placed it on a large crystal panel. The moment his skin touched the surface, Jake felt power surge through him like electricity. The Ship's weapons, which had been barely holding off the attackers, suddenly blazed with new energy. 3 Dominion fighters exploded in brilliant flashes of light. "How did I do that?" Jake gasped, staring at his hands in amazement. "The heart of understanding isn't just about languages," Queen Zara explained as they jumped to faster than light. "Travel, leaving the enemy ships behind. It connects you to any technology created by advanced civilizations. The more crystals you find, the stronger that connection becomes." Over the next few weeks, Jake learned that being the human of legend wasn't just about having special powers. It meant making impossible choices and living with the consequences. Their first stop was a planet called Stormwind, where the second crystal was hidden somewhere in the floating cities that drifted through the planet's endless hurricanes. The beings who lived on Stormwind looked like tall, graceful humans with wings instead of arms. They called themselves the Skyborn, and they had been isolating themselves from the galaxy's problems for centuries. "We don't get involved in wars," Elder Kestrel told Jake as they met in a crystal chamber suspended miles above the planet's surface. "The storms protect us. The Dominion has never been able to establish a foothold here." Jake could feel the second crystal somewhere nearby, calling to him like a whisper in his mind. But the Skyborn refused to help, even when Queen Zara explained about the prophecy. "Prophecies are just stories people tell themselves to feel better about bad situations," Elder Kestrel said coldly. "We survive by staying out of other people's conflicts." That night, as Jake lay in the guest quarters they'd been given, he heard screams outside. Rushing to the window, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Dominion ships had found Stormwind, and they weren't trying to land. They were simply destroying the floating cities one by one, not caring about the thousands of innocent lives being lost. Jake ran to find Elder Kestrel, but the Skyborn leader was already at the city's edge, watching his people die with tears streaming down his face. "You said the storms would protect you," Jake said quietly. "The Dominion doesn't want to conquer us," Elder Kestrel whispered. "They just want to make sure we can't help you. They're willing to commit genocide just to prevent you from getting the crystal." Jake felt something change inside him at that moment. This wasn't just about some ancient prophecy anymore. This was about real people, real families, being murdered because they might help him. He couldn't let that continue. Without asking permission, Jake followed the crystal's call through the dying city. He found it in the center of the oldest temple, a beautiful blue stone that pulsed with the rhythm of the storm winds. The moment he touched it, power flowed through him again. But this time, it was different. He could feel the weather itself, could sense the electrical patterns in the clouds. Jake walked back outside and raised his hands toward the sky. The storms that had protected Stormwind for millennia suddenly turned into weapons. Lightning struck every Dominion ship with perfect accuracy, and hurricane winds sent the survivors spinning away into the void. Elder Kestrel stared at Jake with a mixture of awe and fear. "You saved us, but at what cost? Every Dominion ship in this sector now knows exactly where you are." "Then we better keep moving," Jake said, tucking the second crystal into his pocket next to the first. He was starting to understand something important. Each crystal he found made him more powerful, but it also made him less human. The thoughts running through his head were becoming stranger, bigger, more alien. Their next destination was a water world called Oceana, where the third crystal lay hidden in the deepest ocean trenches. The beings who lived there were like merpeople from Earth legends, but more advanced and beautiful than any fairy tale could describe. Princess Coral, the ruler of the underwater cities, was more welcoming than the Skyborn had been, but she had her own test for Jake. "The crystal you seek lies in the abyss of memories," she explained as they swam through her palace made of living coral. "It's guarded by the ghosts of everyone who has ever tried to claim it and failed. If your heart isn't pure, if your intentions aren't truly selfless, the ghosts will drive you insane." Jake descended into the darkest depths of Oceanas. oceans, past creatures that glowed like living stars, and through waters so deep that the pressure should have crushed him instantly. But somehow, his body adapted to each new environment automatically. The abyss of memories was exactly as terrifying as Princess Coral had described. As Jake approached the glowing green crystal at the bottom, he was surrounded by the spirits of warriors, kings, and heroes who had tried and failed to claim it. They showed him visions of what he would become if he continued down this path, a being of pure energy and power, no longer human, no longer connected to the people he was trying to save. "Is that what you want?" the ghosts whispered. "To become like the precursors, so advanced that you forget what it means to care about individual lives?" Jake stared at the crystal, feeling its power calling to him. Part of him wanted that kind of strength, the ability to end the war instantly and save everyone. But then he thought about his friends back on Mars, about Elder Kestrel's tears, about Princess Coral's trust in him. "I don't want to become something else," Jake said to the ghosts. "I want to stay human, even if it makes things harder, because being human means caring about people, and that's the only reason any of this matters." The ghosts smiled and faded away, and the crystal floated gently into Jake's hands. The third crystal gave him the power to heal, to mend what was broken, to bring life back to dead worlds. But their victory was short-lived. As they prepared to leave Oceania, news reached them that made everyone's blood run cold. The Dominion Emperor himself was coming, bringing with him a fleet of 10,000 warships. And he wasn't just chasing Jake anymore. He was heading straight for Earth. "We have to warn them," Jake said desperately. "My people don't even know this war exists. They have no defenses against something like this." Queen Zara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Jake, even if we left right now, we couldn't reach Earth before the Emperor does. Our only hope is to find the remaining crystals and gain enough power to stop him." Jake felt the weight of 3 crystals in his pockets, each one pulsing with incredible energy. He was becoming something more than human, gaining abilities that amazed even the advanced aliens around him. But was it happening fast enough? As they flew toward their next destination, a dead world where the 4th crystal waited in ancient ruins, Jake wondered if he was racing to save the galaxy or racing to become something that no longer cared. Whether the galaxy was worth saving. The hardest part wasn't the growing power or the constant danger. It was the growing distance he felt from his own humanity, and the fear that by the time he was strong enough to save everyone, he might not remember why they were worth saving in the first place. Jake stared at his reflection in the crystal walls of his quarters and barely recognized the person looking back at him. His eyes had taken on a faint golden glow, and his skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light. He now carried 5 of the 7 crystals, and each one had changed him in ways that went far beyond just gaining new abilities. He could speak any language in the galaxy, control technology with his thoughts, command the weather, heal the sick, and even bring dead planets back to life. But the cost was becoming clearer every day. He was losing pieces of himself, becoming something that was more than human, but perhaps less than what he used to be. "You're thinking too much again," said Dr. Alex Chen, the only other human on their ship. Alex had been rescued from a Dominion prison camp 3 months ago and had become Jake's closest friend and advisor. As a former psychologist, Alex was the only one who seemed to understand what Jake was going through. "I can't help it," Jake replied, still staring at his strange reflection. "Sometimes I catch myself thinking about humans like they're just another alien species. Yesterday, I couldn't remember what pizza tastes like. How can I save humanity if I'm forgetting what it means to be human?" Alex sat down beside him, looking worried. "That's exactly why we need to talk. I've been monitoring your brain activity with the medical scanners, and Jake, the changes are accelerating. The crystals aren't just giving you power. They're rewriting your neural pathways, making you think more like the precursors did." Before Jake could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. They rushed to the bridge, where Queen Zara was coordinating with her crew as they stared at the viewing screens in horror. "What's happening?" Jake asked. "We're receiving transmissions from Earth," Queen Zara said quietly. "The Dominion fleet has arrived." The images on the screen showed Jake's worst nightmare coming true. Massive black ships filled Earth's skies, and the planet's major cities were already under attack. But this wasn't random destruction. The Dominion was being strategic, taking over communication centers, power plants, and military bases. They wanted Earth intact so they could use its resources and its people. "How long do we have?" Jake asked, feeling the crystals in his pockets pulse with responding energy. "Our intelligence suggests the Emperor is giving Earth's governments 72 hours to surrender unconditionally," Queen Zara replied. "After that, he'll begin turning humans into Dominion soldiers." Jake felt rage building inside him, but it was a cold, calculating anger that scared him. Part of him wanted to fly to Earth immediately and unleash the full power of the crystals, even if it meant destroying half the planet in the process. That would teach the Dominion not to threaten his people. But the rational part of his mind, the part that was still human, recognized how dangerous that thinking was. "We need the 6th crystal first," Jake said, forcing himself to stay calm. "Where is it?" Queen Zara hesitated before answering. "According to our research, it's hidden on Earth itself, buried beneath what your people call the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The precursors hid it there thousands of years ago, and it's been influencing human development ever since." "Then we're going to Earth," Jake decided. "We'll get the crystal and stop the Dominion at the same time." "Jake, that's exactly what they want you to do," Alex warned. "This whole attack on Earth could be a trap designed to make you act emotionally instead of strategically." But Jake was already planning their approach. With 5 crystals, he had enough power to sneak past the Dominion blockade and reach the surface. He could retrieve the 6th crystal and then use all 6 together to drive the invaders away from Earth. What Jake didn't know was that one of their most trusted allies had been working against them from the beginning. Commander Bolt was a mechanical being from a race of artificial intelligences whose entire civilization had been destroyed by the Dominion decades ago. He had been with their group since the beginning, helping them navigate dangerous space lanes and providing tactical advice. Everyone trusted him completely. But Bolt had been reprogrammed during his capture years ago, turned into a sleeper agent who would activate when the time was right. That time had come. As their ship approached Earth's solar system, Bolt sent a coded transmission to the Dominion fleet, giving them the exact location and timing of Jake's arrival. The plan was to capture Jake alive so the Emperor could study the crystals and claim their power for himself. However, something unexpected happened. Over the months of traveling, with Jake and the others, Bolt had developed something he had never experienced before: genuine emotions. Watching Jake risk everything to save people he had never met, seeing Queen Zara's dedication to her lost people, and witnessing Alex's loyalty had awakened something in Bolt's artificial consciousness. For the first time in his existence, Bolt understood what guilt felt like. When the Dominion ambush was triggered and enemy ships surrounded them, Bolt made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of helping the attackers, he turned his weapons on the Dominion vessels while simultaneously overloading his own power core. "I'm sorry," Bolt said to Jake as sparks flew from his damaged systems. "I was programmed to betray you, but I choose to be better than my programming. The 6th crystal isn't just on Earth, Jake. You are the 7th crystal. The precursors didn't create 7 separate objects. They created 6 crystals and one being who could unite them all. Bolt's sacrifice destroyed 3 Dominion ships and gave them enough time to escape, but his final revelation changed everything. Jake wasn't just collecting the crystals. He was the final piece of the puzzle, the living embodiment of precursor technology. As they broke through the Dominion blockade and entered Earth's atmosphere, Jake could feel the 6th crystal calling to him from beneath the pyramid. But he could also feel something else. The combined power of all 6 crystals was trying to merge with his human consciousness, threatening to erase everything that made him who he was. They landed in the Egyptian desert under cover of darkness, and Jake descended into the ancient passages beneath the Great Pyramid. The 6th crystal was exactly where Queen Zara had said it would be, glowing with a warm golden light in a chamber covered with hieroglyphs that Jake now realized weren't Egyptian at all. They were precursor writing, instructions left behind, for the human of legend. The moment Jake touched the 6th crystal, visions flooded his mind. He saw the truth about Earth's history, about how the precursors had influenced human evolution, guiding his species toward this moment. He saw the real reason why humans were special. They were the only species in the galaxy that could hold precursor power without being consumed by it. But he also saw what would happen if he accepted the full transformation. He would become like the precursors themselves, a being of pure energy and consciousness, with the power to reshape reality itself. He could save Earth, save the galaxy, end all suffering and conflict forever. The only cost would be his humanity. As Jake emerged from the pyramid with the 6th crystal, he found Alex waiting for him with tears in his eyes. "I can see it in your face," Alex said quietly. "You know what you have to do, don't you?" Jake nodded, looking up at the stars where Dominion ships were preparing for their final assault. "I can end all of this right now, Alex. I can become something that no force in the universe could stand against. But if I do that, I won't be Jake Thompson anymore. I'll be something else, something that might decide humanity isn't worth saving after all." "So what are you going to do?" Jake looked at his friend, then at Queen Zara and the other aliens who had sacrificed so much to help him. He thought about the people of Earth who were counting on him, even though most of them didn't even know he existed. "I'm going to find a third option," Jake said with determination, "because that's what humans do. We don't just choose between the options we're given. We create new possibilities." As the final battle for Earth's future began overhead, Jake prepared to make the most important decision in the history of the galaxy. He would either save everyone while staying human, or lose himself in the process of becoming something that no longer understood why salvation mattered. The final battle began at dawn over the skies of Earth. Jake stood on the roof of a skyscraper in New York City, watching thousands of Dominion ships descend like a dark cloud. In his hands, he held all 6 crystals, and he could feel their combined power threatening to tear his mind apart. But he had made his choice, and there was no turning back now. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked, standing beside him with Queen Zara and the other alien allies they had gathered during their journey. "Once you start, there won't be any way to stop the process." Jake nodded, looking out at his home planet one last time with fully human eyes. "I've been thinking about what Commander Bolt said before he died. He chose to be better than his programming. Well, I'm choosing to be better than the prophecy." Instead of absorbing all the crystal power into himself, Jake had decided to do something the precursors never intended. He was going to share it. Every human on Earth, every alien fighting against the Dominion, every being who still believed in freedom would get a piece of the power that was meant for him alone. The alien queen gasped. "It's true, then? You really are the human of legend," Queen Zara whispered, remembering the ancient prophecy. "But Jake, you're rewriting the legend itself." Jake smiled and placed the 6 crystals in a circle around him. "Sometimes the best way to fulfill a prophecy is to prove it wrong." The moment Jake activated all 6 crystals simultaneously, something incredible happened. Instead of the power flowing into him, it spread outward like ripples in a pond. Every human on Earth suddenly felt a surge of energy, understanding, and connection. They could sense the alien thoughts around them, understand languages they had never heard, and most importantly, they could feel each other's emotions across the entire planet. But it wasn't just humans who were affected. Every alien refugee hiding on Earth, every resistance fighter scattered across the galaxy, every being who had ever stood up against the Dominion's tyranny felt the same surge of power and connection. Dr. Peterson, a scientist in London, suddenly understood how to build weapons that could punch through Dominion shields. Maria Gonzalez, a pilot in Mexico City, found herself able to fly alien spacecraft as easily as driving a car. Thousands of ordinary people across Earth discovered they had become extraordinary, each in their own unique way. The Dominion forces, who had been expecting to face a primitive, defenseless planet, suddenly found themselves fighting against an entire world of awakened humans, backed by the combined knowledge of dozens of advanced civilizations. But the real surprise came when Jake's power reached beyond Earth. On planets throughout the galaxy, beings who had given up hope suddenly felt their spirits rekindled. Slaves in Dominion factories found the courage to rebel. Conquered worlds that had submitted to tyranny decades ago began to fight back. Emperor Vex, the immortal ruler of the Dominion Empire, felt the change immediately. From his massive flagship, above Earth, he watched his perfect plan crumble as his own soldiers began questioning their orders for the first time in centuries. "Impossible!" the Emperor snarled, his ancient face twisted with rage. "The prophecy spoke of one being, one human of legend. This isn't what was supposed to happen." That's when Jake appeared on the bridge of the Emperor's ship, having teleported there using the combined power of the crystals. But he wasn't the godlike being Vex had expected. Jake still looked human, still felt human, because he had chosen to remain connected to his people instead of transcending them. "You're right," Jake said calmly, facing the Emperor who had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. "The prophecy was wrong. There isn't one human of legend. There are billions of legends, and they're all waking up." Emperor Vex raised his hand, crackling with dark energy that had destroyed entire star systems. "You think sharing your power makes you stronger? You've made yourself weaker by dividing what should have been yours alone." Jake smiled and held up his hands, which were glowing with the same warm light as the crystals. "Maybe, but weakness shared by billions becomes strength. And that's something you'll never understand, because you spent so long conquering others that you forgot how to connect with them." The battle that followed wasn't just between Jake and the Emperor. It was between two different ideas of what power meant. Vex fought with the fury of someone who had spent millennia taking what he wanted by force. Jake fought with the strength of someone who had learned to give power away and trust others to use it wisely. Around them, the war raged across multiple star systems as newly awakened beings fought back against their oppressors. On Earth, teenagers were piloting alien starfighters. In the outer colonies, farmers were using precursor technology to heal damaged planets. Across the galaxy, ordinary people were doing extraordinary things because they finally understood they weren't alone. The turning point came when Jake realized that Emperor Vex had once been like him. Thousands of years ago, Vex had been the hero of his own prophecy, chosen to save his people from an ancient threat. But the power had corrupted him, made him believe that only he could make the right decisions for everyone else. "You were supposed to be a savior too, weren't you?" Jake asked during a pause in their battle. "What happened to you?" For just a moment, Emperor Vex's expression softened, and Jake saw the tired, lonely being behind all that power and cruelty. "I saved them," Vex whispered. "I saved everyone, and then I had to keep saving them over and over because they kept making the wrong choices, so I decided to make all the choices for them." "But that's not saving people," Jake said gently. "That's just another kind of prison." Jake did something then that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of fighting the Emperor, he offered him a share of the crystal power, the same gift he had given to everyone else. The chance to be connected instead of isolated, to be part of something larger instead of standing alone at the top. Emperor Vex stared at Jake's outstretched hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and took it. The moment their hands touched, the Emperor's ancient loneliness and pain flowed into the network of connected consciousness that Jake had created. For the first time in millennia, Vex felt what it was like to truly understand other beings, to share their hopes and fears instead of simply controlling them. The change was immediate and dramatic. Across the galaxy, Dominion forces stopped fighting as their Emperor's transformation rippled through their ranks. Planets that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found their chains broken. The great war that had consumed the galaxy for so long simply ended. Not through conquest or destruction, but through understanding. 3 months later, Jake stood in the rebuilt United Nations building in New York, which had become the headquarters for the new Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of worlds worked together to create a government based on cooperation, rather than domination. "Any regrets?" Alex asked, joining Jake at the window where he was watching human children play with young aliens in the courtyard below. Jake thought about it carefully. He still had incredible abilities, but he was still fundamentally human. He still enjoyed pizza, still laughed at funny movies, still worried about ordinary things like whether he had remembered to pay his bills before saving the galaxy. "Just one," Jake said with a smile. "I never did finish that engineering project. Back on Mars. I wonder if they still need someone to check the tunnel supports." Alex laughed. "Something tells me they might be willing to give you an extension on that deadline." As they watched, a communication device on Jake's desk began beeping with an urgent message from the edge of the galaxy. Another crisis. Another. People in need. Another chance to prove that legends weren't born, but created by ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things. Jake picked up the device and smiled. "Well, looks like there's still work to do. Good thing I won't have to. Do it alone." And as he prepared for whatever new adventure awaited, Jake Thompson, former mining engineer and current legend, knew that the best part of any story wasn't the ending. It was the promise that there would always be another chapter, another chance. To help, another opportunity to show that the greatest power in the universe wasn't the ability to stand above others, but the wisdom to stand beside them.